According to the budget team, which appeared before us yesterday, their procedure in granting confidential intelligence funds was composed of the first step of the agency requesting for the said funds. So my assumption is that the President, kasi the Office of the President has both confidential and intelligence funds. Pagdating po dun sa confidential expenses, according to the joint circular, which is being used as the authority governing the grant and the use of confidential and intelligence funds, confidential expenses refer to those expenses pertaining or related to surveillance activities in civilian government agencies that are intended to support the mandate or operations of the agency. And I have no issue with the grant of confidential fund to the Office of the President, a civilian government agency with a multi-dimensional, multifaceted operations, responsibilities, and tasks. No problem sa concept of granting. So it's on the reasonableness na lang po ang ating titignan. Okay. My problem is with the intelligence expenses because our own governing document define this as referring to those related to intelligence information gathering activities of uniformed and military personnel and intelligence practitioners that have direct impact to national security. Dito po ako may issue. I believe that the Office of the President is a civilian office, not a uniformed or military, composed of uniformed and military personnel. And even if it may have some of them, that should not be highlighted because the constitutional policy is we should always highlight civilian supremacy over the military. And I don't think the Office of the President is composed of intelligence practitioners. The President himself and as well as his office are consumers of intelligence already gathered and organized by the intelligence practitioners under, which are the agencies, some agencies under the Office of the President in the executive branch. So that is actually my question, Mr. President. Why did the Office of the President request for intelligence funds and at the level found in the NEP, which is around 2.3 billion pesos, if I remember correctly, Mr. President? Tama ba ako? 2.3 ba?
Kailan siya naging 2.2? 2020. Yeah. The question, Your Honor, is why did the Office of the President request for these funds at that level?
Yes. So it's a compound question, Mr. President. The una is why did it ask, and then why at that amount, Mr. President?
That is the amount that you mentioned, Your Honor, is the amount that it's been set for the last 4 years, since 2020. 2020, 2021, 2022, 2023, and now for 2024, Your Honor.
So on the why, does the Office of the President believe that it is a composed of uniformed military personnel and it is composed of intelligence practitioners, Mr. President?
I think we discussed this during the committee hearing, Your Honor. You raised this point, and the answer given by the Executive Secretary then is that the President is both the user and generator of confidential and intelligence information. And to make, as the Commander-in-Chief, he needs to make very crucial decisions. So the importance of information cannot be understated, Your Honor. And the possibility that he gets filtered information should be bypassed or should not be there, Your Honor. He should be the one getting, although perfect information is impossible in this day and age, but he should be receiving as reliable and as good as wide as possible information, Your Honor.
Well, Mr. President, the President of the Republic is the National Chief Executive. Lahat, control yun eh. The power of the executive branch is actually control, unless I'm mistaken. I will be corrected by our Chief Justice and Attorney Hubert Guevara. I think it's control. So below the President, kung around, let's round off, let's say 10 billion ang total CIF, tanggalin natin si 2.3, below the President would be 7.7 billion pesos worth of confidential and intelligence funds under his control, Mr. President. So, and then, similarly, ang Pilipinas, pinattern naman natin yung system of government natin sa United States of America. President of the United States of America is also the Commander-in-Chief of the U.S. Armed Forces. Just correct me, sir, if I'm wrong. No? And actually, the President of the United States is just briefed with the intelligence results of his intelligence community under him, around 16 agencies, I think. The intelligence funds go to the 16, not to the office of the President of the United States of America, even though he may be, or he is the Commander-in-Chief of their armed forces. So, ayaw ko kung bakit yung good practices kinokopyahan natin, ayaw natin kopyahin dito sa Republika ng Pilipinas, Mr. President.
Well, I'm not too familiar, to be quite frank, with the U.S. system, Your Honor. But I know they also have what they call the black budget, where certain budgetary expenditures are not disclosed publicly if they refer to spending on classified items. And they're, in fact, unauthorized disclosures are punishable under certain laws, especially if it benefits a foreign government or it's seen to be detrimental to the U.S. government. But although we do borrow a lot of our institutions from the U.S., we also modify them to match or meet local contexts and conditions, Your Honor. So, if you look at our Constitution, for instance, like the U.S. now is facing a shutdown because of the budgetary deadlock. So, hindi mangyayari ho yun sa atin because we have our own innovation. We have the reenacted budget. So, I guess, you know, although we borrow, we also adapt. So, siguro, maybe I would like to think that our current budgetary setup is although it's not a static condition, and we here in the Senate, in fact, work to amend it, to make it better, to reform it. His Honor is certainly one of the most hardworking in this respect. So, you know, so I think it's a response to how the actual experience, sabi nga ni Justice Holmes, diba? It's not only logic, but experience which shapes the lawmaking process, Your Honor.
So thank you for mentioning that black budget, Mr. President. Actually, yun totality of the 16 security agencies, Mr. President. And then, hindi kasama dun yung Office of the President of the United States of America. Well, my point, Mr. President, is that this joint circular actually is a joint circular of the COA and the DBM. The DBM is part of the executive branch under the direct control of the Office of the President. And what happens here is that intelligence fund usage, the reports are submitted to the Office of the President. Or before the intelligence funds can be tapped, they have to be requested from the Office of the President. And then our system says that that office itself has its own intelligence fund. So nasira yung controls and checks system po natin. I mean, that's the entire checking system eh. That there is that Office of the President which controls, regulates, supervises, and checks the usage of intelligence funds. And yet, mismong siya ay binibigyan ng intelligence funds. So he reports to himself, Mr. President. So that is the weakness of how we have interpreted and implemented this joint circular na participated in by the executive branch. That is the point, Mr. President. So, sayang kasi, iba kasi yung treatment ng confidential funds Mr. President, right? Reports are submitted sa iba. So even if the Office of the President has confidential funds, magsasubmit siya ng report on the usage of the confidential funds sa sarili niyang office, sa COA, sa Senate President's Office, sa Office of the House Speaker. Ang rules sa intelligence fund, iba. And yet, granted siya and then he submits a report to himself. Bagsak, sirang-sira ang concept of checks and balances and controls, Mr. President. And unfortunately nga, this joint circular was participated in by the executive branch. So sana they should look at the rationale behind the rules, yung how it was divided. Kaya nga tayo nagdi-divide, although overlapping din yung gastos dyan Overlapping, magastos mo, same activity, mag-charge mo sa confidential and sa intelligence fund. Actually, may similarity po So that's my point, Mr. President. So I hope that the Office of the President, if I could appeal to their siguro strict legal strict legal aptitude of the people behind the Office of the President, let us be consistent with the issuances that we have signed on. So, ganun po sana. Ganun po sana. You are civilian office, wag natin i-confuse yung nature natin na meron tayong intelligence fund. Intelligence funds, you monitor, wag natin sirain yung controls. Wag mo bigyan ng sarili mo. But doon sa isang fund, no problem. No, there's no problem. And then yung levels po, napakataas. Our president is an Ilocano, so I appeal to his Ilocano nature to review the amounts. Also the amounts, medyo, kasi the amounts contribute to the bottom line of the budget, contributes to the deficit, which contributes to the debt. Ina-establish po natin kahapon yung klarong-klaro. That's the flow chart, ladies and gentlemen. So I'll just make this appeal. Anyway, siguro in due time, kung meron tayong mga activist lawyers listening to us, maybe a case can be filed with the Supreme Court to test the legality of the grant of intelligence funds to the Office of the President, being a civilian agency.
With the indulgence of the Minority Leader.
Majority Leader, may I just respond briefly before you recognize Senator Tolentino? There are safeguards in the joint circular you mentioned, distinguished Minority Leader. It is subject to audit and documents are available to the Commission on Audit, and the Office of the President is not exempt from those requirements also. So if we're talking about checks and balances, then that is perhaps one. And ang maganda rin sa Office of the President is they have not sought to increase any of these amounts, at least for the last 4 years, Your Honor. Thank you.
Yes, Mr. President, Senator Tolentino wishes to be recognized.
With the permission of Senator Pimentel, who has the floor, Senator Tolentino is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. Just a mere interjection, cum manifestation to the points raised by the good Minority Leader. Mr. President, I heard mention of the joint circular a while ago, which probably was used as the basis of the questioning of the good Minority Leader. It is Joint Circular 2015-01, issued by the Commission on Audit and other government agencies of the executive branch. Mr. President, siguro po na just as a manifestation and to join the exchanges, perhaps the good Minority Leader should have, and with all due respect, referred likewise to a constitutional provision, which is probably germane to the discussion, and this is Section 28, Article 2 of the 1987 Constitution, which provides, and I quote, "Subject to reasonable conditions prescribed by law, the state adopts and implements a policy of full public disclosure of all its transactions involving public interest." And the interpretation, Mr. President, of this representation is that this provision should be read hand in hand with all the circulars, with all the provisions concerning disbursement of public funds. And Mr. President, it would end up as a consequence, as a logical and legal consequence, that Joint Circular number 2015-01, although given recognition and imprimatur of various Congresses in several General Appropriations Act, should be supplanted by legislation, Mr. President, because under the provision which I mentioned a while ago, it made reference to subject to reasonable conditions prescribed by law. So it is incumbent upon the Congress to prescribe the conditions. So what I'm saying is that, Mr. President, the Congress, the Senate, can and should amend that joint circular, because that joint circular, as perceived by this representation, is not by virtue of a valid delegation of legislative power. We cannot abdicate, Mr. President. This is power over the purse. So binigay na po natin lahat sa kanila. Sila yung nag-define. I have here the copy of the joint circular referred to by the good majority leader, Joint Circular 2015-01, dated January 8, 2015, and it made reference to all the terms, confidential activities, intelligence practitioners, referred to by the good gentleman. Perhaps if the intention is really to question the contents of this, a legislation should be made, Mr. President. Dapat tayo po yung gumawa ng guidelines, ng parameters. Although the Commission on Audit, as a constitutional body, can act. But, as again mentioned by the good minority leader, the Analyst Office of the President, the ICOT, involved sila yung mag-approve. Perhaps, Mr. President, it is about time that we pursue legislation giving flesh and muscle to the provisions of Article 28, Article 2 of the 1987 Constitution, defining the reasonable conditions prescribed by law. Siguro po, tapos na lahat yung pag-uusap ngayon. Intelligence funds, confidential funds, discretionary funds, liliwanag po lahat. If the good minority leader would agree. So lahat po siguro ng pag-uusapan natin about confidential funds, maaayos natin kung isa sa batas po natin the spirit of the provision, the constitutional provision I mentioned a while ago. Otherwise, with all due respect, we will be, this probably might not be the appropriate term, we will be continuously delegating our legislative functions to an interagency committee, which would, if time passes by, be considered as an abdication of our legislative functions. Yun lamang po, Mr. President. Lahat po ng pag-uusapan po tungkol sa confidential funds, siguro dahil hindi natin nagawa pa yung batas patungkol dito, and I have here the full transcripts of the Constitutional Commission deliberations tungkol sa discretionary funds. So, dapat po siguro tayo yung gumawa ng batas patungkol po dito. Hanggang saan po yung parameters? Is this was there a complete standard? Kung meron nga, sufficient standard? Were there constraints? Alam na po ito ni good minority leader. Was there an avoidance of undue delegation, etc., etc.? Was there a determinate or determinable standard? I don't think there is any. Kaya po tayo nagkakaroon ng ganitong usapin. Yun lamang po, Mr. President. If the good minority leader would want a response, this will be my continuing manifestation when we tackle all confidential funds issues, Mr. President.
Mr. President, I completely agree with Senator Tolentino on his need for perhaps a law. Everything he said, I agree, except that he said his manifestation would be short. Mr. President.
It was indeed short, Mr. President.
That is already short for his standards, Your
For
Honor.
his standard.
That is already short.
We welcome the
Thank you, Mr.
manifestation.
President.
We welcome the manifestation of our colleague, Mr. President. We are open here in the Senate. Di ba, Mr. Senate President? We welcome interventions from our colleagues. And I think, I don't think Senator Tolentino was present when we met in executive session for the yung Oversight Committee
Yes, the
on this.
Oversight
Yeah. And I
Committee,
think that is the stand of the Senate President, that nothing prevents us from reviewing this joint circular and suggesting improvements, and if these are not entertained, by doing this by law, if
Yes,
necessary.
that is correct.
I think that's one of the.
That will be actually one of the recommendations, Your Honor,
Yes,
of our committee.
if you just go over the rules of our committee, of that committee, when we drafted it, that was one of our intentions. So the manifestation of Senator Tolentino is in line with the intention of the Senate President, supported by a number of us here in the Senate. Well, siguro, if I can just ask the lawyers in the Office of the President to look at 3.15 of that joint circular and then 3.16. Yun na nga yun. Intelligence expenses are defined in 3.15. Uniformed and military personnel and intelligence practitioners. 3.16 defines intelligence practitioners. In-enumerate yung mga ahensya ng gobyerno. Wala ang OP doon except doon sa dulo na 3.16.7, other NGAs which are expressly provided budget allocation for intelligence funds under the GAA and other laws. So it's the GAA which is now the legal basis for the grant of intelligence fund to the Office of the President. But where did the GAA emanate? From the Office of the President, the executive branch, di ba? Yun, umiikot eh. The grant of the authority or the power, umiikot, circular. The checks and balances, doon lang din, basically. But anyway, at any rate, Mr. President, that's just an appeal. So that, because one of the issues, of course, during budget season would be the ballooning debt of the country. So, kung saan tayo makahanap, makakat, especially kung questionable naman yung legal basis, alisin na po natin. Or kahit na clear yung legal basis, but yung amount masyado naman pong unreasonable na, we should also cut. That's just an appeal, Mr. President, because from my basic knowledge of the Constitution, the budget emanates from the executive branch. And the leader of the executive branch who controls the executive branch is none other than the President of the Republic of the Philippines. Okay, Mr. President, may I just find out how does the Office of the President fund the offices of the positions of presidential advisors, Mr. President? Saan doon sa programa ng Office of the President kinukuha yung funding ng mga yun?
There's a line item, I'm informed, Your Honor, on the Presidential Advisory Program, and that's the source for the funding of the presidential advisors, Your Honor.
How much would that be for the 2024 budget, Mr. President?
It is 85,693,000, Your Honor.
How about special envoys? I think this is a practice. The President appoints special envoys. If there are expenses, where is this charged, Mr. President?
I was told that special envoys are usually just nominal titles or titular figures with no actual salary.
Yes.
I remember when my father was special envoy to the EU, he received only a 1 peso salary, Your Honor.
No incidental expenses incurred by the special envoy chargeable to government.
None, Your Honor.
And so that I will not be confused, Mr. President, ito pong budget natin for the maybe salaries and expenses, related expenses of the presidential advisors is found in the OP or in the budget of the PMS, Mr. President? OP siya.
This is the OP, Your Honor. Yeah.
Okay. Who spent for the ad campaign, We Give the World Our Best, which was seen in the London buses, Mr. President?
It's not the OP, Your Honor. Possibly the DOT.
Hindi, iba po. Kaya that's why I'm asking, because iba campaign ng DOT, di ba? Love the Philippines sila eh. Kaya nga doon ako nasasayangan. Actually, Mr. President, nakita ko eh. Kung umabot yung We Give the World Our Best, it's an ad campaign in the buses of London, on the buses of London, gumastos tayo ron. Tapos, a couple of days or weeks later, Love the Philippines naman ang linonch.
It was not the Office of the President, Your
It
Honor.
was not the office of the president. Okay. So it was not a certain presidential advisor. Kung ganon.
Kung meron man, it was not official funds, malamang ho. Baka initiative niya personally, di ba? Maaring ganon. But
So,
definitely...
no, may we know if the office of the president or anyone in the office of the
No, I'm
president
just
is even
speculating.
aware of that
Yeah.
ad campaign?
They're only aware of it in the sense that they also saw it, Your Honor, but they don't really know where the funding came from it. But definitely not the Office of the President, not the OP, Your Honor.
No interest in finding out? No one in the OP, in the entire Malacanang, thousands of people in the Malacanang, no one was interested in finding out?
They can find out, Your Honor, and inform you.
Yeah, please.
Yeah.
Kailangan pa i-request pa pala dito yun, Mr. President.
Hindi rin nila alam, Mr. President.
Well, walang kusa, walang interest. Wala tayong interest sa what's happening. That's an ad campaign. It mentions our country. Sa London. Wala. Nobody lifted the finger to find out. Background information, wala. No one. Okay, sige. Anyway, Mr.
It
President.
was still during the time of Paul Soriano, Director Paul Soriano, Your Honor. That's what I'm told. So, baka siya nakakaalam ho. We will ask.
Wala na ba siya ngayon?
Wala na po. Wala na.
Wala. Pero dapat ang mga institutions natin o agencies, may mga institutional memory naman. I mean, di ba? Pag alis ng tao, wala nang may alam. What's happening to our government agencies, Mr. President? Wala tayong memory. So, okay, so si Papa Larry Gadon, nandiyan pa? Still with the government? I was hoping to meet him here and...
He's the Presidential Advisor for Poverty Alleviation, Your Honor.
Kaya nga, I would have wanted to listen to his plans. Ano ba ang plano? I mean, that's a big challenge, Mr. President. Anyway. So how much are we supporting that poverty alleviation office?
The salary for secretary, di ba? How about staff? Ilan ang staff niya? So wala pa siyang staff as of now. So wala pa siyang. He receives a salary, Your Honor, but as of the moment, I think he has proposed a staff, but that is not reflected yet in the budget proposal because nung na-propose na nila yung budget for the Office of the President, hindi pa na-take up yung staffing niya.
But siguro may space naman dun, Mr. President, to accommodate. Kasi ang bigat nung that's poverty alleviation po ang mandate niya. So, let's give him all the support that is necessary, Mr. President. In-appoint po siya eh.
Yeah, they said they can find from their MOE possible assistance to his office, Your Honor.
Kasi ang questions ko sa mga agencies is paano kayo nararamdaman ng taong bayan eh. Ganun eh. So, ganun din. Baka kung mag-appear siya sa Senate, tatanungin ko siya. Di pa kita nararamdaman na Papa, Larry. Wala pa. He's Papa because he's presidential advisor on poverty
I see,
alleviation.
I
That's it.
Thank you.
What did you have
I
in
was-
mind? What did you have in mind, Mr.
I was
Swanson?
wondering, it's a curious designation, Your Honor.
Okay, Mr. President. So ito na lang po, we have to address this kasi kumakalat sa ano, you appoint special envoys, but has Malacanang appointed a certain Michael Ma as a special envoy of the President?
Is he anything? Is he a presidential advisor? He was. He was a special envoy, but no longer, Your Honor.
Once upon a time. So can I get the period of time that he was special envoy?
We will furnish, Your Honor. We're just waiting for the information. Could you, if it's all right with you, we'll await the information.
Sige, they may have been,
They're verifying,
surprised
Your
with
Honor.
the question. Sige, ganun na lang po siguro. Just give me the... So it is true that once upon a time, Malacanang designated a certain Michael Ma as the President's special envoy to the People's Republic of China, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, that's correct, Your Honor.
Okay. That may have been true once upon a time, but no longer true today.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so,
Yes, Your Honor.
so I think, Mr. President, thank you. That would be all. Kasi we need to clarify these things. Actually, kayo rin ang nasisiraan. So if you don't clarify, if you allow these allegations or chismis siya before, but it turns out hindi pala siya chismis because it had some factual basis. It had some factual basis. Okay. So, thank you for the forthrightness of our, the truthfulness and the honesty of our resource persons, Mr. President. Thank you also for their understanding and patience.
Thank you to the distinguished minority leader. I was also honest and forthright in my answers. Not just the resource persons, Your Honor.
Yes, I'd like to...
I'm just kidding, Your Honor.
Before I recognize the majority floor leader, I'd like to put on record as well that all the CIF of these agencies, confidential intelligence funds, are submitted by report to the Office of the Senate President together with the Office of the Speaker of the House. I just want to put on record that the CIF, or the Confidential Intelligence Funds report of the Office of the President, is one of the most detailed and comprehensive reports that I have seen. It is the most detailed among all the other agencies, Your Honor. And I think, I'm not sure if you were there in that meeting, Senator Angara, but it was about 2 books detailing each and every
Yes.
disbursement. And the nice thing about it, it's a complete report wherein this fund of this amount was disbursed, for example, tipster,
Yes.
for anti-drug program, and which led to an apprehension,
Yes.
which led to a filing of a case,
Yes.
and actually the case is ongoing. So, napaka-detalyado ng report. I must commend.
I confirm that, Mr. President. I
Yes.
was there. Senator Minority Leader Pimentel was there. I think Senator Risa was also there, if I'm not mistaken. And I confirm that there was great specificity in the reports, even mentioning the venue, Your Honor, of the
Venue,
of
the time
meetings.
when it happened.
Yeah, the time.
Even it's sort of like a semi-police report, but shortened, of course, abbreviated.
Yes, short of names, where names were not mentioned.
Yes, so we really appreciate that. Yan ang magandang reporting. Na nakita ko saan talaga ginamit yung pera at saan ginastos, saan pumunta, at may kalarabasan. In other words, may kaso na na-file, may mga apprehensions. So we appreciate that. The others just filed 5 pages, 2 pages. Kaya pati kami naguguluhan dun sa mga CIF ng ibang agencies. Pero sa inyo po, I salute you guys. Your reports were very comprehensive and I would like to say detailed. Thank you. Just for the record.
Thank you, Mr.
Minority Leader, I
President.
think, also wants to comment.
Yes, and I have also I have started actually going over the reports, Mr. President.
Yes.
Nakita ko na rin yung iba. So we are done with the OP. I just saw a question with the PMS, Mr. Sponsor.
Yes, of course, Mr. President.
We have noticed the great reduction from the GAA 2023 level for the PMS to the NEP of the PMS. Can we get an explanation? Mga 47% reduction?
Ano yun? Ano yung red?
Tama po ba yun?
Changes. This was because if we compare NEP to NEP, it's hindi nagkakalayo, Your Honor. But Congress introduced some changes and amendments in this year's budget.
Correct. Kaya what, may we know what initiatives, on what PAPs were the congressional initiatives which were given
This year.
the PMS, Mr. President?
Ito sir, galing PMS. Hindi pa naman po.
Ito yung increase natin.
Hindi sir. Decrease yan.
Ano yung in-increase? Hindi, tinatanong niya ano yung increases this year. Ito. Two MOA items that increase. Ito yun.
Yan. Ito mas complex sir.
There was a budget increase for, are you sure? RTV? Wala kanya? Kanila to? For RTVM or Radio Television Malacanang, amounting to 46. Lahat to or ito lang?
Sir, umpisa tayo dito sa PSMOE.
There was a request for additional budget for personal services amounting to 165 million. For MOE, 400 million. Capital outlay, 131 million, Your Honor. Including a budget increase for Radio Television Malacanang or RTVM in the amount of 46.65 million, Your Honor.
Kasi kung hindi na po maulit yan sa this budget cycle, therefore, what would be the PAPs that they were able to do in 2023 na they won't be able to do anymore in 2024 because they have been deprived of these amounts? Mr. President, ano ba pinakamahalagang aktibidades doon?
A lot of the travel, Your Honor. Foreign travel, yeah.
Oh, how come we did not anticipate this in the NEP? Because the President's budget increased sa travel niya eh. So dapat may di ba logic na lang yun? You are the support staff of the Office of the President. He will travel. Umingi siya ng travel. And then now, you did not adjust at the NEP level? May we know who is the head now of the PMS, Mr.
Yusek,
Sponsor?
Attorney Elaine Masukat, Your Honor.
Is he here?
She's here, Your Honor. She's here. She's the
Ma'am.
beautiful lady in black, Your Honor.
Welcome, Ma'am Elaine. So yun lang po yung tanong, di ba? I mean, napansin niyo na tumaas ang travel budget ng Office of the President. Tama? Ginawa natin 1 billion na yata. Tama ba? Oh, PMS, you will wait for congressional initiative to supplement your travel budget?
Well, PMS is not always accompanying the President, Your Honor, unlike previous year. So they're only on a as needed basis, Your Honor. It's usually going forward. It will usually just be the agencies that are really needed for those travels, Your Honor.
Kaya, but for 2023, they asked for it and they got it, and then halos half of your budget kasi congressional initiatives. But at any rate, I just want them to know that this has been observed. I mean, so.
Yeah.
For 2024, are you asking for some congressional initiatives also? Just like you did for this year?
As of now, nothing yet, Your Honor, but nothing prevents us from adding to their budget if necessary. Yeah.
Well, they just justified that it is not necessary anymore, Mr. President. Sinabi na po natin yung sponsor that they will no longer travel with the President. So good. Is that office led by an Ilocano, Mr. President? Huh? Are you an Ilocana, ma'am?
No,
That's the trait that we want in budgeting, Mr. President. So for that, congratulations for that. So thank you once again, Mr. Sponsor. And
thank you very much, distinguished Minority Leader.
Mr. President, there being no other reservation for interpellation, I move that we close the period of interpellation and consider the budget of the Office of the President, the Presidential Management Staff, and as well as other agencies to be deemed submitted for the body's consideration. I so move, Mr. President.
There being no objection to the motion, the budget of the President's Office, OP, and other executive offices like the Presidential Management Staff is hereby deemed submitted. Congratulations to the men and women of the OP and TMS. May I ask for a minute suspension?
Mr. President, I move that they consider the budget of the Office of the Vice President and acknowledge the presence of its officials led by Vice President Sara Duterte. We now recognize the distinguished Chair of the Committee on Finance, Senator Sonny Angara, to sponsor the same and to interpolate our Deputy Minority Leader, Senator Risa Ontiveros. I move that they be recognized.
Yes, before I recognize the gentleman and lady, I would just like to, of course, welcome to the Senate our distinguished Vice President Sara Duterte, may silingan in Mindanao. Ma'am, mayong buntag, ma'am. And to the whole family of the DepEd community, good morning to you all. So we'd like to recognize the distinguished sponsor, Senator Sonny Angara, and to interpolate a distinguished colleague, Senator Risa Ontiveros.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Majority Leader. We're ready to receive questions. But just for the record, the budget for the Office of the Vice President is 1,874,019,000 pesos. Thank you, Mr. President.
Salamat kaayo, Mr. President. Magandang umaga pong muli, good chair, and to the OVP, maayong buntag. Mr. President, good chair, in 2022, the confidential funds of the Office of the Vice President were augmented by 125 million pesos from the Office of the President. Now, during the proceedings at the House of Representatives, it was stated that the OVP submitted on January 17, 2023, a liquidation report covering these funds. Currently, the Commission on Audit is auditing the use of this 125 million and has committed to finish by the 15th of this month. Sayang hindi lang umabot dito sa ating plenary interpellation. Pero, Mr. President, good chair, ano na po yung status ng audit na ito?
I'm not sure, ma'am, but maybe we can ask the Commission on Audit when they come before us next week. When they
Will do,
that
Mr.
they would be
Chair.
in a best position to answer, Your Honor.
Mr. President, the chair is not in receipt of any initial findings of the COA.
No, Your Honor.
Thank you, Mr. President, good chair. Now, that said fund transfer or augmentation is being challenged. As a longtime senator and as our Committee on Finance chair, ano po tingin nyo, Mr. President, good chair, anong tingin ng good chair, ang pwedeng maging pinaka-prudent na policy kaugnay ng augmentation ng isang budget category na hindi na-allocate naman ng funds in the first place? Dapat bang i-regulate ang ganitong practice o kaya ipagbawal pa natin ng Kongreso?
Thank you, Your Honor, Senator Risa, our Vice Chair and Deputy Minority Leader. Your Honor, what I was told is this was not an augmentation because an augmentation has a very technical meaning in budgetary terms. What I was told is this is a release from the contingent fund, thus not subject to the rules set forth in laws and jurisprudence, which pertain specifically to augmentation of savings, which are authorized to be done by the Senate President, by the Chief Justice, and other officials who are permitted explicitly by the Constitution.
Salamat, good chair. Conceding for the moment na at least sa ngayon, hindi subject or hindi pa subject sa rules at procedures ng augmentation at pinag-dedebatihan pa nga, di ba, kung augmentation nga ba yung nangyari or ibang proseso. Still, kung hindi pa yung rules at procedures ng augmentation, such a move of big money from the most important office of government to the second most important office of government, syempre, kailangan siyang ngayon sana o eventually, sooner than later, mag-govern ng mga rules at saka procedure. So, kapag nabuo na or mabubuo na yung rules at procedures na iyon, ano, Mr. President, ang tingin ng good chair na dapat maging prudent policy tungkol sa ganyang klaseng augmentation man yan o release man yan, basta paglipat ng malaking pondo mula sa importanteng opisina papunta sa importanteng opisina. Hindi ba dapat ma-regulate yung ganitong practice? Or even, given kung gaano ka kalabo yung kasalukuyang rules at procedures at given kung paano naging kontrobersyal itong mismong paglipat ng mismong perang ito, hindi kaya dapat ipagbawal ng Kongreso?
Sa akin, ma'am, medyo specific na ho yung nasa batas ho natin ngayon, kasama na po yung mga desisyon ng Korte Suprema, specifically yung Araulio decision. Dahil doon, nakalagay doon na kung ano yung mga patakaran sa paglilipat ho ng pondo. And again, I'm referring to the transfer, or not transfer rather, but the augmentation of budgetary items, meaning specifically savings. At doon, pag yan ang pinag-uusapan, yung kategoryang yan, meron ho talagang mga very specific rules dun sa, bukod sa konstitusyon or sa ligang batas, meron din ho nakalagay ho sa mga desisyon. So yung bawal po yung cross-border transfers, kailangan existing po yung budgetary item bago ma-augment siya ng ibang pondo galing sa savings. Ito pong nangyari dito sa OVP, ito po ay release mula sa contingent fund ho, which for 2022 was 13 billion pesos, and it's still the same amount to this day. At ito pong contingent fund ay sumasagot sa mga pangangailangan po ng gobyerno, lahat po, iba po ang patakaran dito. Hindi po itong dahil hindi nga ito augmentation ng savings, iba po ang patakaran pagdating ho sa pag-release or paglabas ng pera mula sa contingent fund, Your Honor.
Salamat, Mr. President. Good sponsor. Kaya nga, interesante at tingin ko rin po importante yung sinimula nating pag-usapan kahapon na simula dun sa kasalukuyang special provision tungkol sa contingent fund na nagpapayag at nagbabawal din sa mga specific kinds of releases. Nagbabawal halimbawa sa paggamit ng contingent fund para sa motor vehicles. Kaya po binuksan ko na rin kahapon, Mr. President, good sponsor, yung posibleng at the proper time pag-amyenda na ipagbawal din mula sa contingent fund ang pag-augment or ang pag-release o paglipat patungo sa CIF ng ibang opisina. At kaya lalo din, Mr. President, good sponsor, yung diskusyon nga natin ay magiging very timely at the appropriate time. Siguro, Mr. President, good sponsor, yung susunod na punto ko, pwede po bang mag-provide ang good share ng mga kahit general details kung paano yung 125 million na iyon ay ginastos, no? Considering yung said amount ay inexpend sa loob ng 11 araw. Malay natin, may election dito, best practices ng OVP na yung ibang mga ahensya gamit ito pwedeng pagandahin yung kanilang absorptive capacity considering na yung underspending, gaya ng sinimula nating pag-usapan kahapon, major problem pa rin, no? Tulad sa ating diskusyon sa interpellation kahapon.
At ito po yung akibat po nung pag-implement nung yung safe implementation of the programs, activities, and projects of the Office of the Vice President to alleviate poverty and promote the general welfare. At nakita natin nung sa komite, Your Honor, napakarami pong program ang OVP, from libreng sakay, yung pagbubukas po ng maraming satellite office, yung pagbibigay po ng tulong sa libing, sa paggamot, sa napakarami po. There's so many services that were provided by the OVP, Your Honor.
So ibig sabihin, Mr. President, good sponsor, yung 125 million ginastos sa 11 araw o on average mga 11.3 million a day ay ginamit lahat yan para lang ligtas na maimplementa ang mga libreng sakay o paghahanda para magbukas ng satellite offices o magpalibing, magpagamot na itong lahat, yung pagsisiguro ng kaligtasan nito, iyan ay umabot sa on average 11.3 million pesos a day, Mr. President?
Yung 11 days, yun po yung period of disbursement nung pera ho. But if you include the period for obligation, it was actually 19 days. And if we look at the services performed or the use of the funds, goes beyond actually the 11, or whether there's 11 days or 19 days. 19 days pertaining to the period from when the SARO was issued, which allows the agency to obligate the funds to the day it's finally paid for, where the services or any contracts are paid for, and thus the cash is considered disbursed. Does not mean that all the services or all the information, for instance, will be given on those days. Meaning, the information could have been given subsequent to the contracting and disbursing of the money, Your Honor. So, tapos yung confidential fund is used to ensure the safe entry for implementation of the programs and, of course, of the Vice President and her staff to various points of the archipelago. For instance, Your Honor, sa Surigao, sa BARM, in other provinces, meron ho talagang mga insurgency dyan. So, kailangan siguraduhin na maganda yung pagpasok ng mga programa at saka ng party ni VP, and to guarantee that the program implementation is also always data-driven. So thus, the OVP was able to enter several geographically isolated and disadvantaged areas. For instance, in San Remigio, where they distributed pagbabago bags, school supplies, and dental kits to grade 1 and grade 4 school children in 33 barangays. And the CF is also used for purposes of continuous monitoring and validation of claims, especially for those made in or lodged in the satellite offices. So sa Bulacan po, for instance, the Office of the Vice President validated complaints that there were persons selling OVP assistance and forms. So meron hong mga ganong instances na talagang kinakailangan ho.
Sige po, Mr. President, good sponsor. Kahit sabihin natin, for the sake of argument, so ginastos yung 125 million sa 19 days, still, 6.5 million pesos a day iyon. So kahit itanong po natin yung ibang pinagkagastosan nila, information, different provinces or regions, lalo na yung mga apektado pa rin ng insurgency, sigurado naman hindi lang yung OVP security ang nag-secure ng OVP, whether the head of office or the personnel or the implementers ng mga programa, pero yung AFP at PNP on the ground. Well and good, data-driven, dapat yung mga programa. GIDA areas, ito po ay termino din ng Department of Health. So, malamang sa hindi or posible nakikipag-ugnayan ng OVP dun sa mga programa, activities at proyektong iyon sa DOH. Hindi kaya yung mga bags, school supplies at dental kits ay tumatawid na sa budget naman ng DepEd na concurrently hinihead ng Vice President. So, claims, various provinces, validation of complaints. Again, still, even with this listing, palagay ko lamang po, Mr. President, good sponsor, reasonable pa rin itanong kung bakit posibleng umabot sa 11.3 million pesos a day ang gastos. And in any case po, just for the sake of thinking aloud, hindi po ba pwedeng i-convert yung mga worthwhile programs sa mga ito into line items sa budget? Mr. President.
Your Honor, actually the funds were requested as early as August 2022. But the SARO, or the authority to obligate and disburse the money, was only given in December. So talagang, kumbaga, obligado rin silang gastusin yung pera, Your Honor. Kasi kung hindi, di ba, we have a modified cash-based budgeting. Pag you use it or you lose it. So, pag hindi mo ginastos yung pera, maaaring mawala sa ahensya mo yon, di ba?
Yes, thank you, Mr. President. Good sponsor. Kung ano man, kung yung SARO na-release sa Disyembre, still, kaya yung interest at yung curiosity ng publiko, bakit at paano nakagastos ng ganyang kalaki sa napakaikling panahon lamang. And good sponsor, were any of the programs that the good sponsor mentioned funded with confidential funds?
Sorry, could you say that? Or any
Were
of the
any of
programs?
the programs that you mentioned, good sponsor, funded with confidential funds?
No, Your Honor. They strictly adhere to the joint budget circular issued by the DBM and the COA, which lists the permissible expenses for CIF, Your Honor, from confidential and intelligence funds, namely yung purchase of information, yung rental of safe houses, and of course they were conscious of the or items which are not allowed to be spent under the said circular, Your Honor.
So kung hindi po, paano sila pinondohan kung hindi dun sa CIF? Mr. President.
Well, they have regular budgets also, Your Honor, which they can access for. They have budgets for MOE, for capital outlay. Those are all at their disposal.
So lalo pong lumalaki yung misteryo kung paano ginastos ang CIF na 125 million sa loob lamang ng 11 araw. Kung hindi man lahat, pero kung marami sa mga binanggit na pinagkagastosan ay kinover naman ng regular budgets. At alinsunod sa utos ng COA, hindi ginastosan ng confidential and intelligence funds. So, salamat po. Salamat kaayo, Mr. President. Salamat, good sponsor. Those are actually my only questions for the OVP budget today. I'll be back at the proper time to propose amendments to the OVP budget for the consideration of the good sponsor and the plenary. Salamat po.
Thank you.
Salamat
Thank you, Your Honor, Vice Chair Senator Risa, and we'll be happy to discuss with you any possible proposed amendments. Thank you po.
Maraming salamat po.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you very much, Senator Risa. The Minority Floor Leader,
Yes, Mr. President, the Minority Leader wishes to be recognized.
you would like to recognize the Minority Floor Leader, Senator Coco Pimentel.
Thank you, Mr. President, with the permission of our sponsors. Alam niyo po, last year, kasi that this is, I think the Office of the Vice President last year received the highest ever budget for the Office of the Vice President. So, and this year we're increasing. No? Are we increasing, Mr. Chairman, in our committee report? The bottom line budget of the OVP.
For 2024, it's increased by 30. No, actually, it's in the Senate version, it's decreased, Your Honor.
Correct. It should decrease because the
Yeah.
Senate committee report
We adopted the HGAB
yes,
version, Your Honor. So
did not grant, our
Yeah.
committee report did not grant the 500 million peso confidential fund. Is that correct, Mr.
That's
President?
correct, Your
The
Honor.
effect is that there is a reduction if we compare GAA 2023 to committee report 2024 on OVP. The reduction is
500. But it's the figure of 2.343 billion minus 1.874 billion, Your Honor. So if the staff would calculate, please. Only Senator Bongo can do these calculations without a calculator.
Anyway, yes, we get the idea, Mr. President. Hindi pala reflected to sa ating summary because we were comparing it with the House version. Apo.
It is less by 469 million, Your Honor.
Okay, sige. So that means we remove 500 and some other items increase siguro most likely, Mr. Chairman, if you can tell us which ones. Kasi by 30 million may nag-increase. It may be the automatic appropriations sa sweldo. So, sweldo siguro. Sweldo.
No, we're not talking about 2020. We're talking about 2024. Why is it only 469 when tinanggal natin yung 500? It should be 500. Ano nga? Kung may 35, ano nga yung tanong niya? You get it? Because if we do 500, it should be less by 500. Yeah, yeah.
$30-something. Binawasan ng 500.
No, but he's talking about the 2024.
Ng 30 million ang sum items.
Oo.
Ano kaya?
Why, kung kinagalan yung 500, why is it not 500 less? Because your question, Your Honor, is, sorry, I think we're getting jumbled with the
Yes,
number of
okay.
versions here. What
Yes,
is the
okay.
question? Your question is,
Okay.
because your question is on the GAA of 2023, Your Honor. That's why narito kami.
Nalito,
Because it's 500 less than the NEP, but it's not 500 less than the 2023
Thank you for
GAA.
that clarification.
Opo.
So that
nahilo
means
kami
the
momentarily.
questionnaire was also confused kung ganon. Mr. Pero that's the statement from the sponsor. NEP compared to our committee report, the budget, NEP 2024
Kung NEP
NEP,
500, opo.
it's a clean 500 million.
Yes,
so
yes.
we know
Yes.
where we got
Yes,
that
yes,
from.
yes.
Okay, so
Because your
klaro.
question was about
Yes,
the 2023
klaro na
GAA.
po.
Kaya
Yes,
na-confuse kami momentarily.
So I am amending my question and I'm now getting the correct answer. Hindi po ba the budget, itong pag-appear ng agencies is the time for them to make some appeals? If the Congress is entertaining cuts in their budget, this is the time for them to make an appeal. If they want a restoration, augmentation, or anything, changes in their budget. So, if we can ask the Office of the Vice President, the Vice President herself is here, Mr. President. Is she making an appeal for the restoration of the 500 million confidential fund to her budget, Mr. President?
Your Honor, actually, we're in receipt of a statement from the Vice President we discussed earlier. And according to her, the OVP can only propose a budget to support the safe implementation of its PAPs, or programs, activities and programs, to alleviate poverty and promote the general welfare of each and every Filipino family. Nonetheless, they will no longer pursue the CIF or CF. And the reason why is because it is seen to be divisive, and as the Vice President, she swore an oath to keep the country peaceful and strong.
So just as I commended the Office of the Ombudsman, the Department of Migrant Workers, and the other agencies which willingly gave up their CIF or the CF or did not even ask for these funds, given this latest manifestation by the Vice President, I commend her, Mr. President, for now categorically stating to this House that it's not a deferral to our wisdom. She does not want it anymore, Mr. President. So if that is how I understand the statement, I commend the Vice President. Senator Tolentino.
Senator Tolentino is asked to be recognized. Senator Tolentino.
Thank you, Mr. President. Just a quick manifestation cum intervention again, and to remind this committee that I made a continuing manifestation a while ago relative to the existence of the joint circular emanating from COA and various agencies, and the possible remedial legislative measure that would enable Congress to comply with the reasonable conditions provided for under the Constitution. Mr. President, perhaps the minority leader, with all due respect, should be reminded that budget proposals coming from the House, going to the Senate may propose or concur with amendments. That would be the operative words coming from the Constitution itself. So it's no longer lodged with the Office of the Vice President, but the decision should come from this chamber, Mr. President, just to manifest that constitutional provision. But we agree that there was a nod, a concurrence coming from the head of the office itself. Thank you, Mr.
Thank
President.
you for that reminder, Mr. President. Although the Constitution is on my desk, I don't think I need reminding anymore, Mr. President. But at any rate, That's the purpose of the budget hearings, di ba? That's the purpose that we make them appear to get their opinion. Because if we flood them with funds, sabihin nila, hindi na namin kaya din yan. I mean, we should get their reaction or their inputs, Mr. President. So, I think that settles it, Mr. President. That's a statement of the Vice President. Tama?
That is the
And she is here, so okay na yun. So, that settles everything, Mr. President.
Yes, hopefully, Your Honor.
So, again, just as kinommend ko yung ibang ahensya ng gobyerno, with that manifestation, I commend the Vice President and the Office of the Vice President. Although last year, because of siyempre the budget was the highest ever for an Office of a Vice President. And then I looked at the programs. Sabi ko nga, parang duplication of some programs of the other agencies of the government. So, the Office of the Vice President would have to put up the structures, the necessary to implement the programs. Kunyari, medical assistance, parang parang DSW din eh. Educational assistance, parang DSW din, may program din yan. So, siguro, my question now is, kumusta po yung inyong budget utilization for all of those programs na nabanggit natin last year, like Libreng Sakay, I think you have a Kalusugan food truck, you have a Pagbabago campaign, 1 million learners and trees, you have a RISE program, Relief for Individuals in Crisis and Emergencies yun, and then you have a Medical and Burial Assistance program, you have a Magnegosyo Taday, that's your livelihood assistance program, and ito parang bago, you can be VP. I don't think I heard this last year, but I may be wrong. But kumusta po yun? Because yun yung worry ko eh. We have hundreds of millions for each program, and then they look similar to existing government programs of other agencies. Ang problema, we have to now set up the structure to execute and implement the said programs.
The obligation rate of the Office of the Vice President, Your Honor, is 73% as of September 30.
Obligation is 73%. Okay, that's obligation. That means the funds are now, anong tawag mo doon? Obligated. So ano na siya dyan? Earmark na siya for a certain expenditure.
Yes, and the disbursement rate
yes.
is 84%, Your Honor.
80, of what, ano po to? Compare it to appropriations?
Over
Allotments.
over amounts obligated, Your Honor.
84% of the amounts obligated. And then the 70 plus of the obligation rate is over
Obligations
allotments?
over allotments, Your Honor.
Allotments. And then the how much of the appropriations have been allotted or released, di ba? Ganun yun? That's the term. Allotted means released.
Fully released, Your Honor.
Fully released. Okay, sige. Okay po. And then itong ano kasi the Office of the Vice President has been I think has in its plans the construction of an the physical Office of the Vice President. And is it correct that there is an entry in the unprogrammed funds of 2 billion in connection with what is this the construction of the OVP? Is that the building or the acquisition of the land, Mr. President? Tama ba ako? May 2 billion.
It's for the land, Your Honor, but I think they're still under negotiations. There's still talks ongoing as to, so there's no there's nothing final or nothing contracted out as of yet, Your Honor.
Yes, but it is correct to say that in the 2024 budget, there is a 2 billion entry or item in under unprogrammed appropriations. Tama
That is
po ba
correct,
yan?
Your Honor.
It's for land acquisition of the Office
Land
of the
acquisition, Your Honor.
So if there have been negotiations, so may kausap na. So where is the intended location of the Office of the Vice President? May we know, Mr. President?
They're talking to a few, Your Honor.
So
Not just one, not just one.
So it's still open. So in different areas of the country, no? So we cannot even say it's in Luzon, Visayas, or Mindanao.
Just in NCR, Your Honor.
It's in NCR. Okay, thank you for that, Mr. President. But I think for this year we allotted, we appropriated 10 million for down payment. So we have not used this kasi kung wala pang final contract, wala pang down payment. Opo.
That's correct, Your Honor. Still unutilized.
Opo. And then, the Office of the Vice President has its own security and protection group, Mr. President. Am I correct?
Yes, Your Honor. Yes. They've,
And I think they have 433 personnel composing this Vice President Security and Protection Group.
yes, Your Honor. As of, yeah.
The expenses for this VP Security and Protection Group are not lodged with the Office of the Vice President. It's lodged with some other agency. Am I correct, Mr. President?
There is a special duty allowance which is for the security personnel, which is charged to the OVP budget, Your Honor.
Which item under, maybe you know under what item, and then what is the total amount for that item, or is it charged against a program?
Yes, we're just finding out which program, Your Honor. It's charged to the OVP budget. Yeah, there is a, this is the, there's an item for special duty allowance in the amount of 25,308,000, Your Honor.
For 1 year na po yan.
That's for
Opo.
2024. Yeah.
Yes, for 1 year, 25 million. Kasi yung bulk ng compensation ng mga security personnel would be found in their mother units siguro. So
Yes,
may we know, so that when the time comes, may we know from what agencies the VP security group come from?
PNP and AFP, Your Honor.
PNP and AFP. So we'll just ask from them siguro yung budget for the 433 regular personnel composing the VP SPG. Okay, so I think, Mr. President, yun na lang po. It's good that the OVP can still efficiently execute their programs, their planned programs, Mr. President. So pero yung pagbabago yata, the plan is a million bags. You want to distribute 1 million bags. That's the long-term plan. What is this for the entire 6-year term? Is that the plan?
Yes, Your Honor.
1 million bags. Okay, so at any rate, Mr. President, of course, I also realize we need to give the Office of the Vice President some flexibility in the budget process and some flexibility in thinking of or coming up with programs or PAPs which will make the office more relevant and somehow directly and or indirectly help her constituents, the constituents of the OVP. So thank you for the patience of our OVP family, and thank you to our sponsor for his forthrightness this time, Mr. President. Maraming salamat po.
Thank you, distinguished Minority Leader, for your kind words for the OVP and also for the sponsor. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Majority Leader.
Mr. President, there being no other reservation for interpellation, I move that we close the period of interpellation and consider the budget of the Office of the Vice President to be deemed submitted for the body's consideration. I so move, Mr. President.
There being no objection to the motion of the Majority Floor Leader, the Office of the Vice President is deemed submitted. Congratulations. Session suspended for 1 minute. and resume deliberations of the budget of the DepEd by 1:30. So we'll have a 1-hour lunch break. Session is suspended.